What does EVE Online, Leftover Pizza, and Roy Moore at the Madston Mall all have in common? They're all old and hard. So you read about some massive PvP battle in EVE Online and decided to investigate further. You then saw some video called This is EVE and thought to yourself, it looks okay, I guess. Oh my god, it looks amazing. So you casually stroll over to the website to create an account. You download the client, and before you know it, you're knee deep in asteroids thinking, this sucks. When do I get to kill someone? In fact, I want to fly Titan. What do I need for that? Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Or perhaps you tried delving into some aspect of the game, only to find yourself quickly overwhelmed by the mechanics. If you quit at this point, I wouldn't blame you. EVE's complexity is a double-edged sword. While it does provide for a depth that is rivaled by few other games, it also means that many new players either get bogged down in activities that they don't enjoy or crushed under the arcane hammer of impenetrability +5. Of course, I don't mean to imply that anyone that can make it through the new player quagmire will love EVE. Ultimately, it is a niche game. However, a clear picture of what EVE is and what it has to offer might help to attract those players who would actually enjoy it. Alright, time for the $1 million question. When I first started thinking about playing EVE, I heard someone say that it's a brutal, PvP-centric game with a harsh death mechanic. That's a pretty good start, but I want to dig a little deeper. Well, first off, EVE is an MMORPG. However, as long as you're not yet old enough to be drawing Social Security, you should already know what that is, so I'm just going to move on. PvP is, of course, a major gameplay element of EVE and one of its big draws. As a result, I think it's important to help you guys wrap your heads around PvP, but I don't want to use 10,000 words to do so. So here goes. Alright, first of all, you can make EVE look like this, however doing so will put yourself at a serious disadvantage. Since you're going to want to arm yourself with as much information as possible, this is more representative of what EVE is going to look like for you. As you can see, PvP is real time. However, things like reflexes and inputs per minute have less influence over outcomes than knowledge and good decision-making skills. In fact, player knowledge is probably going to hold more influence over outcomes than anything else. Now, I don't mean to say things like character skills and the cost of your ship don't matter, because they do, but they're much more akin to advantages that help swing the odds of victory to your favor or increase your engagement profile than any sort of I win button. Indeed, Suetonia of EVE is Easy has numerous videos of him getting solo kills with low skill characters and or low cost ships. Alright, let's talk about the death mechanic. When you die, your ship is destroyed and anything you have on you has a 50-50 chance of either dropping or being destroyed as well. Items that do drop can be looted by yourself, victorious fleet mates, the enemy, or even opportunistic passerbys. This mechanic may seem oppressive at first, but it's actually pretty kick-ass. Of course, the mechanic affects the game and player behavior in numerous ways, but right now let's look at how it helps to level the playing field for new players. So, if players didn't have to worry about losing their stuff, they'd only fly their baddest, most expensive ships. And then new players flying around in their space dumpsters would be constantly getting stopped by blinged out Tengus and shit like that. Instead, this mechanic and the fact that linear performance increases are coupled to exponential price increases encourages most players to try to put together ships with good price to performance ratios rather than simply the most expensive ships that they can afford. In other words, you don't need to be a 10-year space-rich veteran in order to be able to put together competitive ships. So I could go on about other cool effects of the death mechanic, such as it making trade and industry highly lucrative professions, it providing for adrenaline pumping action, or the fact that you keep what you kill. But I still got a lot I want to cover, so moving on. While PvP can happen anywhere in space at any time, you're not going to be thrown into the lion's den when starting out. Since a NPC police force responds to illegal aggressions within high security space, players just won't attack each other willy-nilly. Basically, don't give people a reason to attack you. Don't trash talk, cry, or fly loot piñatas, and people will pretty much leave you alone. And if you're worried about losing your stuff, just remember Eve's first golden rule. Don't fly what you can't afford to lose. Alright, I'm spending a lot of time talking about PvP, so time for the lightning round. Different ships have different strengths and weaknesses and support a variety of playstyles. PvP is done solo in small gangs or in massive fleets. People usually don't fight fair, and any ship can and probably will be destroyed. Alright, let's talk sandbox. Expect no guided tour through a theme park MMO and little hand-holding. The new player experience and the career agents will offer a little upfront guidance, but after that you'll be dumped into the universe and left to find your own way. This freedom is awesome when you have some idea of what you can and want to do, but it can also leave some players scratching their heads, spinning their wheels, and doing activities that they don't enjoy. By now you might be asking, okay, that's great and all, but are you actually going to talk about what there is to do in Eve? Well, shit. Okay, look, there is an absurd amount of stuff that you can do, and the core gameplay loops of those activities can vary dramatically. However, if we zoom out and take a more macroscopic look, 3 easily summarized gameplay loops can be observed. So let's go ahead and do that. First up, we have the Care Bears. These guys spend 99% of their time in-game doing some form of PvE and only engage in PvP when it's quote-unquote non-consensual. For these guys, PvE is the end game. The next group also does PvE, but they use the proceeds for PvP fun. They may derive enjoyment from both activities, or they may just be using PvE as a means to an end. The final group avoids PvE entirely and strives to pay for the PvP habit entirely through PvP. Anyway, I hope to go into more detail for all these activities in later videos. In the meantime, however, remember that if you don't like doing something or you're getting burned out with it, then stop doing it. Find something else that challenges, excites, or entertains you. Hell, even if you do find an activity you like, I encourage you to try out different stuff. You may find you like different things for different reasons. For example, I like doing exploration for the thrills, missioning and ratting for a relatively automated activity to do while watching videos, and mining for socializing. Okay, if you're an alpha account, you're going to have some restrictions, but for omegas, nothing's off the table. You may be scouting in an agile interceptor one day, pumping out blistering DPS with your battleship the next, and using a logistics cruiser to repair your fleet mates the day after that. Assuming you have the skills, you can conceivably fly any ship, use any item, and perform any role. Naturally, your choices will be limited at first, but as you train up your skills, more and more ships and roles will open up to you. And I guess now is a good time to talk about skill training. There are no classes, levels, or XP in Eve. Instead, it has skills which train passively in the background, whether you're playing or not. This is great for weekend warriors and other people who don't have time for the grind, but it also makes it difficult for new players to speed up their skill training. As a new player, I remember impatiently waiting for skills to train, and I doubt that I'm unique. All I can say is that it gets better. It may feel like training for your first ship that you really want can be measured in eons, but once you have a bunch of ships in your hangar and multiple goals to keep you occupied, it stops being a problem. And besides, skill levels may influence ISK efficiency and PvP outcomes, but there are no skill level prerequisites for fun. But back to player freedom. So there's not a lot of restrictions on player behavior. I mean, you can't cheat, do real money trading, grief players, or attack noobs in starting systems, but you can spy, scam, steal, ransom, build intricate Ponzi schemes, and pretty much do anything else you can think of. If you want to use scumbaggery to become one of Eve's trillionaires, the only thing standing in your way is your own ingenuity. The two main aspects to the player-driven world are the economy and sovereignty. First, Eve's economy is an actual functioning economy dealing with virtual goods and a digital currency. Let me be clear, algorithms don't drive prices. Player supply and demand does. Players mine, salvage, loot, build, and otherwise procure the vast majority of things that you find on the market. The harsh death mechanic and the player-driven economy allow some players to turn brains and a little bit of elbow grease into fortunes. Sovereignty is the other big component to the player-driven world. Basically, there are large sections of the game universe that are able to be claimed by players. Players want these parts because of their potential to generate large amounts of wealth, and so they fight over them. Needless to say, this generates an unending stream of propaganda and trash talk. Oh, and also creates massive amounts of player-generated content too. Alright, time to talk about the million-ton supercarrier in the room. As I said before, Eve is ridiculously complex. This does result in amazing depth, but it also makes it rather impenetrable to new players. Fortunately, there are a lot of great resources out there for helping players to wrap their heads around it all. Wikis, articles, YouTube channels, and new friendly corps are all great assets to help you find your footing. So I could spend a lot of time on this section, but I seriously doubt that saying that Eve has great depth would be a controversial statement. So rather than getting into the nuts and bolts of another section, it will have to suffice to say that Eve is a field day for people who like to do things like make builds, develop optimal strategies, and suss out ways to exploit the meta. Of course, there is traditional MMO grind in Eve, but it is optional. As mentioned before, skill training happens passively, and you can make your money from PvP. Obviously, if you spend your days doing PvE, things will get grindy, but the bulk of Eve's content doesn't come from quests or events, but from conflict and cooperation with other players. Needless to say, this keeps Eve challenging and exciting. I wanted to know what Eve players loved about the game, so I carefully crafted and administered a survey using impeccable research methodology. Yeah, okay. I found an old forum thread on the topic, and then I shoehorned people's often detailed and nuanced responses into categories that I made up on the fly. That's how you use science, right? Anyway, players regularly mention a few aspects of the game that I want to touch on here. So first, let's talk community. When I was in Eve University, random corps were constantly declaring war against us in order to get easy kills. One day, within the space of a few hours, we had two different war targets swing by our campus. The first was quite friendly and was soon answering gameplay-related questions by us noobs. The other guy, he never stopped talking shit. It wasn't humorous, playful, or clever trash talking either. It was just nasty. Needless to say, you're going to encounter players from across the spectrum. The question is, what is the community like as an aggregate? Personally, I think the community is pretty awesome, and I would appear to not be alone. Indeed, community was the fifth most common response in the aforementioned thread asking players what they loved about Eve. Hell, it even outranked PvP. Of course, I seem to have gravitated toward corps and people in-game who tend to be helpful, friendly, and or laid back, so I have to admit that individual mileage may vary. It would definitely be a mistake, however, to look at a handful of cherry-picked examples of players behaving badly and assume that they are representative of the whole community. Will you encounter assholes during your time in Eve? Undoubtedly.
I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes.
But they're not as pervasive or difficult to avoid as they are in other competitive games. The main thing to remember is, if you find yourself in a toxic corp, get out. Individual corp cultures can vary wildly, so shop around. It may take you a while, but eventually you'll find your home. So, with the exception of the Chinese, every player from around the world plays on the same server. Everyone, and I do mean everyone, lives in the same game universe and remains in that shared universe at all times. Even if a server node experiences too much load, i.e. due to a massive battle, no instancing occurs. Instead, time dilation is implemented, which slows down time for all the solar systems on that node. Needless to say, it's one big party. Alright, home stretch. Let's wrap this up with a fact. Is EVE free to play? Yes, but it has a pretty good model. So you have alpha accounts and omega accounts. Alphas don't pay anything, but they're limited to the ships that they can fly and the skills that they can train. Omegas pay a monthly subscription fee, but they have no such restrictions, get a bonus to skill training speed, and they can also dual box. As you can imagine, alpha accounts are basically a taste to try and get you hooked, but they do allow you to try before you buy, and you can still have a lot of fun with them. The restrictions will likely incentivize you to upgrade to a paid subscription at some point, but they're also going to be getting access to even more ships and skills, so there's never been a better time to check out EVE. Is EVE pay to win? No. The harsh death mechanic, competitive environment, and excellent game balance means that all ships will be destroyed on a long enough timeline. And if someone uses Plex to buy a ship that would otherwise be outside of their means, the chances are pretty good that their player skill level isn't going to be commensurate with the ship. Sooner rather than later, it's going to wind up as a shiny kill on someone else's kill board. In my opinion, Plex is best used by players without a lot of free time to grind for money, and only then to buy ships that are matched to their player and character skill levels. Is EVE balanced? Yes, and remarkably well. That's not to say that there isn't any problems or that people still don't complain, but I maintain that CCP has done and continues to do a remarkable job.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Damn, even summing up is hard. In fact, I'm just going to cop out on this one and not even back up my assertion. Perhaps I'll tackle this subject in a future video. Moving on. Is EVE dying? Well, I've never worked in game development or publishing, don't have an MBA, nor have I looked at CCP's financials. But I have seen all of Nerdslayer's Death of a Game videos, and I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so I feel pretty qualified to weigh in on the subject. No. EVE was released in May 2003, and in under 90 days, the internet saw the first declaration that EVE was dying. People have been echoing those words ever since. But like the grandma that's draining family resources, it refuses to die. EVE's fanbase is small, but dedicated. Just don't ask me how CCP keeps the lights on. I guess they find ways to keep overhead low. For real though, do I fear the day that the servers go dark? Of course I do, but I'm not ready to bury it just yet. EVE does appear to be past its prime, but I certainly wouldn't characterize it as having one foot in the grave. In human years, it's probably like 37 or something. I expect it to stick around for a while. Now, could I be wrong? Could it be dead in a year or two? I guess it was the life he lived. Possibly, but I doubt it. Anyway, while doing research for this segment, I found out something interesting. Did you know that EverQuest is still alive and kicking? Now, it's probably rocking low 4-digit player counts, but it is still getting expansions. Never stop EverQuesting, guys. So, can we expect EVE to have a similar experience with its golden years? Who can say, but it is something interesting to think about. After it has shed most of its player base, leaving only a dedicated core, will small gangs of elite players rule the sky? Will corps with 100 active members be indomitable forces that hold dominion over vast regions of space? Will alarmists finally stop proclaiming the death of EVE? Who knows what the future holds. In the meantime, however, you can find me in game having fun. EVE Online is a niche game for a niche audience. Its strengths make it adored by devoted fans, but its weaknesses discourage new players from diving in. If you are intrigued by anything I've said here today, however, I highly recommend giving it a go. Alpha accounts allow you to get a feel for the game without having to spend a dime, and there are already tons of excellent resources to help new players find their footing. If I could only make one suggestion, it would be to join a corp. They can have multiple benefits, not the least of which is providing some well-needed guidance. I only have personal experience with EVE University, but all these corps have reputations for being new bro friendly. Also, If you're looking for another review and for some reason you haven't seen Mandalore's one yet, I highly recommend you check it out. He goes into more detail on individual activities and is highly entertaining. EVE Online. She can be a harsh mistress, but if you're into that sort of thing, you've come to the right place. Finally, I'm including a referral link below this video. Using it will net you 250,000 unallocated skill points, and I'll get a Plex kickback from CCP if you ever go Omega. This helps to support my channel as it allows me to spend less time IS grinding and more time making videos. For those who are about to join our community, let me be the first to welcome you.
We accept a one of us. We accept a one of us.
Gooba gobble, gooba gobble.
We accept her. We accept